Welcome to the HC Biz Show, the podcast dedicated to unraveling the business of healthcare. I'm Don Lee, joined by my co-host Shahid Shah, and Shahid, episode 200.
Yay!
Welcome.
We made it. It's been it's hard to believe it's been what 6-7 years now since we've been doing this.
It's just over 6.
Yeah. And this is all 200 of the modern format. But remind everybody
Correct.
how we started here.
Yeah, absolutely. So this all started back in 2016, February 2016, as a marketing effort for a startup I was working on at the time. We were trying to do a tweet chat, and I didn't want to look foolish and be the only person at my tweet chat. So I was, seeding the room like you do. And Shahid, you were one of the people that I reached out to, and you replied like, yeah, something along the lines of, yeah, like tweet chats are kind of lame, but I'll show up. We should do a weekly talk show. I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about? A weekly talk show? So if you think back then, we didn't know each other that well. It just, we were kind of industry chums, if you will. We bumped into each other now and then. I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about, but I'm going to say yes, because that's what I do. And I said, sure, let's do a weekly show and we'll figure it out from there. That, of course, turned into the Blab series. That is what you're referring to. Prior to these 200 audio episodes, we did 30 Blab episodes, which was, for those of you that remember, a really cool platform that hung off of Twitter. It was really nicely integrated, so you can hop from a Twitter conversation into a 4-way live web video. And now, obviously, that doesn't seem super novel. Now we're all on video all day long, every day. But in 2016, it was a little bit novel, especially to just jump in live like that. So we hosted 30 of those. They were based off of the tweet chats. Every week we'd come up with some topic. We're going to talk about the doctor shortage. We're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about, what startups are going to be showing up at HIMSS, whatever the case was. And then people would, from the tweet chat, would just kind of jump in and we'd have a conversation. And it went from kind of this, ad hoc-y, random people showing up. We were having great conversations with great people, but then all of a sudden we started like reaching out to people and asking, and, not long after we had the spokesperson for CMS come on and talk about Macra live on Blab, which was super fascinating. So it just evolved like things do. Eventually Blab crashed out, and because they had no business model, it was just burning investor capital for a while. And once that ran out, we had no choice but to switch over to audio, and here we are, 200 episodes later. So it's been a pleasurable 6 years here, learning with you, Shahid, and learning with the audience, and yeah, just excited to keep it going.
Yeah, and I think that the key words there were learning with the audience. I think that one of the reasons you may not know this, but one of the reasons I always say let's do a talk show or let's do a talk is because I want to learn more, right? So this is all this entire thing. When I made that suggestion, was really to get you for free to teach me things, right? And so same thing with our audience. We're going to talk to our audience, but we learn a lot more when they send us an email or a complaint, et cetera, to say, hey, why aren't you covering this? This topic is much more important at my hospital than this other topic that you guys keep talking about. And I think that's really what did this, our post 200, our next 200 episodes, we want to try something new. And that is really focused on the business of healthcare, not just by interviewing third parties and interviewing very, very important interview subjects, but really figuring out what's keeping us from doing the business of healthcare innovation. Is it a lack of a process? Is it a lack of tools? Is it a lack of education and training that people might have? It could be a combination of all of it. But one thing you and I discussed off air was, how do we be more practical so that every episode ends with something someone can do at their job, at their if they're volunteering somewhere, at the place where they're volunteering, to actually move the needle forward. And one of the best ways to do that is almost like have a open discussion every week about problems that we've heard about, problems that we're going to share, and hopefully more people will come back and tell us about whether it resonates, and then say, okay, well, what is a more disciplined approach towards solving complex healthcare problems, but keeping them tied to the business of healthcare so that when we solve a problem, it is sustainable. When we solve a problem, it can be paid for by itself, and not just do a bunch of wishful thinking. Like in the United States, we often complain that healthcare is a business. Well, that's not a complaint. That's a reality, right? It's like
Right.
you can say anything you want to, but healthcare in the United States is a business. And you've heard us say in the podcast before that there is no business model in United States healthcare to do the right thing. Well, if there's no business
Right on.
model to do the right thing, you have to have another business model, and then you have to do the right thing. You have to combine those two together in some disciplined approach to make it go forward. So I'm looking forward to this new type format. What do you think about what we should do for the next 200 episodes?
Yeah, I mean, just to extend on that first is that idea of finding a way to do the right thing within the system. And I think that's been part of our journey all along here. We'd say, what are the things that are good for doctors, good for patients, good for the overall business of healthcare, good for society? And it's like that cross section. And you got to find things that fall in the middle of all of those, because there are certainly ways to make money in healthcare where you take out more than you put in, and you don't really add a lot of value for everybody else just by doing arbitrage or figuring out like how to kind of manipulate a very complex system. It's easy to hide to make money in a complex system. And we've always looked for, well, who are the people that really have something, that are doing great work, that do have something that could benefit patients, doctors, society, and the business, and we help align that. And I think that continues to be, that has been the theme for me throughout, both on the show, in my consulting practice. Really everything I do has been all geared around how do we find those things that should succeed and then help them find that alignment. And to me, when we start thinking about like, what do the next 200 episodes look like, I want to continue to do that and do a better job of is how do we help people to really truly understand the problems that need to be solved, the problems that health systems and health plans want to solve, and help them all find that alignment where the solution meets the need, falls into the business model, can be paid for, can be sustained. And that's the sweet spot. And I think that's, if we can continue to help people find that going forward, then this will be time well spent for me. And I'll feel like I'm contributing to the world and I'll be happy. So that's my goal with all of this. And I think that this concept that you've come up with and that you've put out through Metigy around the innovation lifecycle ontology is a great thing for us to rally around and kind of base our approach around, because it can help us build that common language and help us to drive things forward in a meaningful way, but in a repeatable way, in a measurable way, because sometimes we fail because we don't know exactly what we're doing, but other times we fail because we've previously succeeded by accident when we didn't know what we were doing, and we're trying to repeat it. We have no idea why it worked in the first place. And I think all of that, if we're going to add structure around all of that stuff and align it towards real problems that people are trying to solve, that's my goal for this show. So why don't you introduce that concept of the ontology and how we can rally around it, as I said.
Yeah, I think that when you think about how we build products and services, there is a lot of commonality. And if every one of us just invents everything from beginning to end, then the actual problems don't get solved, because you and I could literally be spending 80% of our time on things that have already been done, or 80% of our time learning things that have already been learned. And so in other industries, you have these what are called bodies of knowledge, or BOKs, and you have taxonomies, you have ontologies. Medicine has an enormous ontology, already has an enormous taxonomy, very well structured, and medicine has been around for thousands of years. So we're not going to teach doctors and nurses how to do their job of medicine. But when doctors and nurses start to do, let's focus on one area, let's say digital innovation. They're trying to take something that's analog, like a visit, and moving it to digital, like telemedicine. Well, that one shift by itself from going from analog to digital has enormous implications, and it's not just naturally understood by doctors and nurses and admins and health insurance professionals. So the question is, when we are doing innovation in healthcare, whether it's digital or creating a medical device or anything of that ilk, can we follow some disciplined life cycle? Is there a beginning, middle, and an end to this process? And so that's really where you're talking about it at Health Impact. I guess it's been a couple of months now. We introduced this idea of the innovation lifecycle ontology. The most important part isn't the word O, which is isn't the letter O with ontology, but really the innovation lifecycle. We think, and this is, as we introduced it to the audience at Health Impact, which are mostly healthcare delivery organizations, large academic medical centers, hospitals, health systems, and the innovation community there, we said, is there a value in a life cycle, coming up with one? The answer was yes. Well, what does that mean? What is an innovation life cycle? Well, life cycle usually begins somewhere. And so what we made the case was that we need to spend a lot of time, and maybe the first 10 or 20 of the next 200 episodes will be about innovation expectations. Like, how should you define what you expect from an innovation? So, for example, there are modern techniques like objectives and key results, older techniques like MBO, management by objectives. You can have a KPI-driven set of expectations, but you've got to pick something that says, I want to solve this problem of, quote, telemedicine, as if, that's small enough to just pick and say one thing. But if you are going to do telemedicine, you're going to first answer the question, why? Why do I need telemedicine? That answer you're going to get pretty quickly because my patients want it. COVID has a lockdown. I mean, it could be a whole bunch of different reasons. Yep. But one thing is going to be difficult for us to start with is, what do you expect to happen? Do you expect to gain more patients? Do you expect to retain patients that you already have? Do you expect to switch your patients from people only coming in to those that are only going to be in the telemedicine or the virtual side? That's called expectations management. And really that, as we've done these last couple hundred episodes, that's one common theme that we've seen over and over again is either they don't know, the innovator doesn't know why they're doing something, or they might know why in general, but they don't know specifically why they're doing it. And the specifics of why you're doing it must start with expectations management. And I think that's something we can discuss over the next few episodes is, how do you do expectation management? Should it be OKRs? Should it be something else? Is it something that that we're doing in medicine that we could use? What have you heard about problems with expectations management in the industry?
Yeah, so this is something that I battle with all the time, frankly. And what you see is organizations, and like this information exists within the organization, but I think sometimes the teams aren't that good at kind of bringing it all together in a meaningful way, right? So what happens is you got a big health system, bunch of different groups, organizations, sub-organizations, different departments have problems that they want to solve, and somehow that ends up with being a final objective of, we need a population health system or something like that, some kind of generic thing. Another industry might be, we need an ERP system, but for us, it's often, we need a population health system. And without those, OKRs or whatever measurements that you have, and without those very specific problems that you're trying to solve, what ends up happening is you approach it generically and you say, well, what do we need a population health system to do? It's like, well, it's got to do quality measures, and it's got to do integrations, and it's got to do all these different things. And there's lots of vendors that'll come out and tell you, yeah, we could do all those things. Here's the things we could do. And you'll spend all this money, you'll be down the road, and nothing productive will happen. And then everyone will say, see, we can't have interoperability in healthcare. Nothing works. This is all too hard. And, the system doesn't want us to succeed. But it all started because we didn't manage those expectations. We didn't know what we were trying to accomplish, and we didn't know how we were going to measure whether or not we accomplished it along the way. And if the ontology does one thing, or if the process that we do, I said, I want to help drive this things forward, we don't have to take everybody to the end for me to be happy. If we can just solve this problem or make this problem a little bit better, where people won't leave those meetings with vague expectations or vague, we need tool X or tool Y, they'll walk out with, we need to solve this problem. And the reason we need to solve this problem is because it will help us do this. And we're going to do these early measures to make sure we're on the right track. And we're going to do these trailing measures to make sure it worked over time. And we're going to meet and we're going to review these things. And we're going to make sure that we're actually on track and we're achieving it. If we're not, we're going to adjust. And there's going to be ways to hold your vendor accountable because of all of that. Like that's almost always lacking, I'll say. And I don't like to speak in extremes like that, but it's it's true. It's almost always lacking. It's very rarely done properly. And it's not that hard, really. It takes discipline and it takes asking good questions, but I think people don't do it because they just don't know how to. And I
Yeah.
think like an ontology can help them. And once they know how to do and why to do it, I think people can do it pretty easily.
That's
What do
right.
you
And
think?
and
Is
another
that
thing another thing we can do as part of the community and as part of HC Biz as a service to the community is if you're working at a small doctor's office or a chiropractor's office or a dentist's office or a large hospital academic medical center and you have used a set of key performance indicators, some measures in the past. Now, remember, we're talking about healthcare, which knows about measures all day long. I mean, how do you know whether you have diabetes or not? Because your A1C is some number above some other number that you measure and over
an
time
objective measure?
track the progress of. So it's not like this community doesn't know that. So that's not what we're
Yep.
talking about. We're saying, what should the measure be? Everybody knows you need the measures. Any vendor, in fact, it's a good way of knowing whether your vendor is serious or not. If one of the first questions your vendor doesn't ask you isn't like, would you like to see my demo? Instead saying, what are you trying to accomplish with a remote patient monitoring solution? Like if they don't want to ask about your
Yep.
accomplishments or what you're expecting first, go to another vendor because they're going to waste your time. Now, as you start to lay this out, this is where the community can jump in. And this is, where we've created the site on Metigy so that if somebody has KPIs that they're using, if they have the measures that they're using, and I know in my prior startups, we've done the same, is come up with OKRs, come up with a little spreadsheet that just says, before we get started, here is what our measures look like. If we do well, here's what they should look like in 6 months. The only thing you know in innovation is that you will be wrong. Some way, somehow, you're going to be
Yeah.
wrong. The question is, how fast do you fix it? Well, you can't fix it if you don't know what you're trying to measure against. So this is the place where the innovation lifecycle ontology starts, is expectations management. So articles, case studies, etc., about how to do expectations management. Now let's look at a common scenario. What happens when you don't have expectations management? When the next step, which is what we refer to in the ontology as innovation discovery, it goes awry. If you don't know your expectations, how are you going to know which vendors to go look at? How does it work today? You're going about your merry business. Doctors are helping patients and hospital CEOs are running hospitals. Vendor calls at noon shows one of your nurses or one of the affiliated physicians some really slick new tool. That doctor calls up the CEO and says, hey, I just saw this really cool tool. It does X, Y, and Z. Now, the hospital CEO, who has to retain that doctor, by the way, says, oh, Dr. Jones, that's awesome. We'd love to take a look at that vendor. And obviously, in the back of his mind, he's thinking, oh my goodness, not again, not some crazy vendor who showed this doctor something that they wanted to see. Now, if that doctor was told by the CEO and said, fantastic, I'd love to see that tool. Could you just show me what your expectations were in this format? Fill out just these 3 bullets. I don't need to know all the vendor details. I don't need to know security. None of that other bullshit about logistics. Just fill out 3 bullet points. How are you going to
Just
measure something
expectations.
before or after? And by that time, by the way, as soon as that phone call finishes and the hospital CEO puts it up, one of 2 things will happen. The physician's going to say, well, that's too hard. I don't know how to measure this. I'll come back to it later, which solves the problem because the thing doesn't get
That's money
any time of
saved
day.
right there.
But the other thing might happen, which is the doc goes, holy cow, that's a good idea. Is this going to actually help reduce A1C levels in my patients or not? Right? That's the measurement. And now then the second part, which is the discovery. When that vendor comes in, what are you going to ask them? If you don't have your expectations set, you're going to let the vendor drive the demo. That is the most successful way for them to do the demo, which is to wow you, to school you, to fool you. However you look at it, their job is to move the sales process forward and get you involved. So you can't do the discovery part well if you don't have the expectation set. And so, just tell us, Don, what are you hearing in the industry? How do people get introduced to these products?
So I think that happens a lot. Like someone gets excited because they went to a conference, and it could be it could be a doctor that gets excited about it, or it could be the CIO or CEO gets excited about something, and they don't go through that process. Just because they're at the head of the organization doesn't mean that they've gotten there because they know how to do this well. It's a historic problem. I've been in software for 25 years now, and it's like it's a historic problem in software is that it's still like it's not real to people. Like you can do whatever you want with it. It's malleable, and if somebody says that I put a thing on a blockchain, it's going to lower my revenue, and it's going to use AI, and it sounds awesome, and it's going to look really cool in a newsletter. They might get really excited about it before they have any problem to solve. And I think there's two ways to look at this. Is like one is I love that internal kind of take on it because the problem could just go away because the person's not willing to do that work, or even better yet, the problem might go away because they do the work and they're like, oh, it doesn't actually help me. It doesn't help me as well as I thought it would, or in the way I thought it would. So maybe that's not a good investment. Maybe we can find something else that can solve that problem. The flip side to all of this too is we're talking to vendors and startups and everybody else here, maybe more so even than the HDOs on this show. And this is something that you as a vendor or a startup can do for your customers is go in there and help them through this process. Don't like fall yourself into the trap of, the whiz bang, wow, I'm going to show you everything this can do. And, just try to get you to buy it. And then we'll figure it out once we get in there, because that's going to look good when you close the sale, but it's going to be a problem over time, right? So when you get in there, you can do the job of, what you said it. Make sure your vendor asks this question. Well, if you're a vendor, make sure you're asking this question. What problem are you trying to solve? Why do you want to solve that? What is it? What problem is it going to make go away? What is it going to enable you to do that you can't do today? And why do you care? What other organizations within, what other departments within your organization are going to be impacted by this? Is that going to be good for them or bad for them, right? Like you're starting to clear the way for innovating within this system before you even make a sale. And like your customers will pick up on this. This is the harder path, but your customers will pick up on this. It will make you stand out from everybody else that's coming in there and pitching with just, the colorful graphs and everything. And it's just like you're setting yourself up for success. If you as a vendor help your customer set expectations, now you have something to shoot for, something to aim for, something to demonstrate value with over time, which is going to make them a good, long, sustained customer and allow you to do meaningful work, which every entrepreneur I meet in this industry, they want to achieve meaningful work. We're not here to make money. I think there's easier industries to make money in. We're here because we're trying to make a difference and make money while we do so. And that's, I think, the best path to doing it.
Yeah. And so when you think about the problem at the innovation side, after you've built your product is when the real work begins. Let me say that again. After you build your product is when the real work begins. And what's the real work? Product market fit. Well, how does product market fit occur? Well, you do a bunch of discovery calls with customers to say, hey, I just made this, or hopefully you had discovery calls before you made it, but let's assume you're now having the calls after you've made it, which is unfortunately quite common. So now you're talking to doctors, nurses, hospital CEOs, CIOs. When you're talking to them, you're going through your own life cycle. Yours is called the sales life cycle. So if you're selling into a company or a hospital, you start with a lead. That lead then goes through qualifications and nurturing, et cetera, and then gets to the middle of the funnel. And the middle of the funnel is where deals go to die because somebody had really good interest up at the top. Because you wowed them, you did the right thing, you showed them a product and they're like, wow, I'm in. Okay, so now it's trickling down to the middle of the funnel. The middle of the funnel, the reason why I say that's where deals go to die is that's where the doc wants to hear from another doc that the product works. Or the CIO of a large academic medical center on the West Coast calls his friend on the East Coast and says, hey, these crazy guys, Shahid and Don, have this wonderful idea. Does this even work at your hospital? He's like, no, those guys were knuckleheads. So this idea of social proof of connecting between two customers happens naturally. In fact, almost all these very large sales, they have sales teams, but it's one guy at one hospital saying, yes, I agree, you should buy this at another hospital. So the idea of word of mouth, the idea of referrals happens all the time in healthcare. And those innovators, that understand that this happens in the middle of the funnel. Like the exciting part is not the top of the funnel. The exciting part is the bottom, where you push them through and into a sale and into a signature. Now, what happens in the middle here is the evaluation or the intelligence gathering that customers have to do. Well, if you know that customers have to do this intelligence gathering anyway, how about you put it together in the way that makes it easy for them? Like give them the list of contacts they should call, tell them all the articles that is on Gartner or on Forrester or on Class. Now, a lot of innovators in the healthcare community do this already, right? They want the Class printout, but there are many, many more products that the companies like Class and analysts like Gartner don't cover. Well, what do you do then? If you did your job right in the expectation setting, like you wrote a half-page document that you gave to your customer and said, here is how you should see your current practice or your hospital. You are operating with 200 beds. Your per bed revenue per night is N number of dollars. Your length of stay is Z. And here's what we can do. We can keep your length of stay short, but increase your dollars per bed per night. Well, now guess what? Everybody switches to that conversation. If you didn't bring that up and all you did was show features and functions, what are they going to do? They're going to talk about the features and functions. But smart clients, which is what you want as an early adopter, right? You want smart clients who know what they're doing so you can use them for testimonials in the future because you're going to need that social proof. So you want them in the future. The smartest clients are the ones that say yes early on. But those smartest clients are also the ones that have the highest expectations that you have to work with. So our innovation lifecycle ontology starts with expectations, then moves towards what we call discovery, like how do you align the discovery? But then right after that, there are multiple other steps. One is in the evaluation phase, like help your customers evaluate you independently, right? So give them the material in that middle of the funnel to say, look, you're going to evaluate us. Here are some ways that others are evaluating us as well. Do their job for them, and that'll make your life easier. So as you then go from evaluation, then your pilot planning and adoption comes in. But before we even go there, Don, I'd like to talk about maybe how should we structure this over the next 5 or 10 episodes to really just focus on those first 3 areas: expectations, discovery, and innovation, intelligence, and evaluations. What could people use on Metigy today that might help them out understand this? And maybe more importantly, not understand it, but critique it and come back and tell us, hey, Shahid, this is completely wrong. This is not the right ontology. We have a better idea on the ontology.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's I say it's not hard before, right? I said this stuff's not hard, but like it is hard too at the same time to organize the thoughts around it and do it in a way. So if you take this from the beginning, you break it down, you say, okay, well, where does all of this start? This all starts with identifying the use case or the problem to solve, the reason to do something. And one of the tools that we talked about, a health impact, that I think could help with this is this idea of the case study submissions. So if you're at a health delivery organization and you did identify a problem, you did solve it, and you did work it through and succeed by some objective measure, right? There was some return on investment there that you can point to. Like having people submit those types of use cases, those types of case studies into a center like a Metigy so that we can aggregate them, pull out learnings from them, and use those as starting points, I think would be a fantastic thing to do long term. Can we do that real quickly over the next couple episodes? Obviously not. So in lieu of that, in lieu of this kind of real world evidence of here's a problem that was solved and a benefit that was felt in production, I think the best way to do it would be to help our audience understand, like, what is the early question asking phase that we go through? Like when you walk into a client or I walk into a client and they say, we're trying to do X, kind of breaking down, like, what are the questions that we ask and how do we identify or help our clients identify the value that they can attain and they can measure for and they can, and like start there, those early questions. That's the best thing I come up with in terms of getting people off on the right track. After that would be coming up with what are those good measurements to go out and quiz all the vendors on, like, how are you going to demonstrate this, this, and this? I had one question I had a client ask me a long, long time ago that I loved in a sales process was, how will you prove to me that you've been successful? That's me as the vendor, right? So they knew a problem they were trying to solve, and they had their way of measuring it internally. This was one of those good clients. I ended up working with them for like 15 years. How are you, Don, going to prove to me that you've succeeded in solving my problem? It was a fantastic framing for the conversation. So I think helping people understand, like, how do you come up with good measures then and tie those back to that value proposition that has been established. At that point is when you can then go out and really start shopping for vendors in a meaningful way. I think, like, coming up, those would be good places to start. How about you?
Yeah, I think that maybe to dive down into a little bit more practicality is to say, we probably are all doing parts of this already. So on the healthcare consumer side, as well as on the innovator side. Now, what we lack is some way of sharing all of this in a structured way that says, yes, this area is about our expectations. So let me see, what were all the different measures? So it's almost like a measures catalog, right? It could just be a bunch of articles today, but really moving towards what we've built out as an ontology. There's actually a tool. This is a computer science and knowledge management, very disciplined area for ontology management. There's an open source product called Protege. Protege it's a tool that you open up, and it has your structures and says, okay, what is your ontology? How is this concept? What are all the concepts? How are the concepts related to other concepts? And how are these concepts related to others? And you can bridge all of these things. So we've started that on the Metagy site, but it doesn't have to be going all the way to, detailed computer science. We just have to say, is there a value in the community for having a bank or a registry of measures that have been used in the past for digital innovations and similar kinds of products and services? If so, that's fantastic. The idea that you mentioned about the case studies, that's just another practical way of saying, if you've already done a case study, upload it to us, right? Now, one benefit that you get automatically by uploading the case study, if you did one, is that you can use it as social proof because it's all public. You can upload the case study and then send it to your customer. And when the customer sees that this case study is on Metagy.com with a bunch of other innovators and not on your website, what does that do? It makes it naturally more believable because it's not you talking about yourself. You've heard on this podcast at least 10 times in the last couple hundred episodes is, nobody cares about you, Mr. Innovator. Nobody cares about your super cool product. The only one that might care is your mom. That's it, right?
Maybe.
Beyond that, everybody wants to know, why do you matter to them, right? And that's what these are. Case studies
problem do you solve for me?
Exactly what you just said, Don. I love that question that your customer gave you is, prove to me that you'll be good for me. I love that.
Yeah,
so
that's fantastic. It was a great framing.
Yeah, and I think that's really what we want to do, is make it a practical area where, not that any of this is super unique in the sense of being able to share, but when you toss something on LinkedIn, it's going to disappear into the ether as news tomorrow or 2 days from now, or certainly 2 years from now. But when you start looking at artifacts, the delivery of these artifacts that we use regularly as the thing that we are sharing, whether it's a catalog of measures, whether it's a catalog of ways of finding products and services, what are all of these things together going to do? They're going to help train and educate the procurement officers or the people doing the procurement. So for example, in a large academic medical center, nobody makes the decision by themselves. It's always in a consensus. Sometimes that consensus is 3 people, sometimes it's 35 people, sometimes it's 3,500 people. If you don't know that, and let's say there are 10 people that are in the consensus building team, one person is looking at one expectation, another person looks at another measure, another person goes to yet another site to look for a news article. What did you do? You've made the process. Why does it take so long to sell into healthcare? Because of this consensus building process. Well, imagine that you showed them your expectations, showed them how they can find other products and services in that help with those same expectations. Then you help drive to say, here's how you should evaluate us. If you're trying to meet this measure, ask these 3 questions. If you're trying to meet this measure, ask these 3 questions. Now, you're probably listening to us and looking at us saying, What are you, nuts? Why would I tell them about my competitors? You don't have to tell them about your competitors, because it is a dumb idea for you to tell your customers about a competitor that they may not know. I completely understand that. But you can say that if you find any competitors, here's the questions you should ask the competitors before you even watch a demo. What did you just do? You took an objection, codified the objection, handed them the objection as a measure, and then made it measurably difficult for your competitor, who probably is not going to know the answers to those questions directly, to be able to compete with you more effectively. Now, all of this surrounds this one premise. Nobody cares about you as an innovator, only what you can do for them. Well, then work the ontology and work the life cycle. So you say this entire process, in order to get to a yes and a signature on a proposal or a bill of sale, the entire process there, we call that the sales life cycle, right? We call it the marketing funnel, which moves to the sales funnel. But all of this is doing what? Trying to find a disciplined way for the customer to either give you a fast no, or naturally build consensus so that it gets down to a yes. Sometimes, by the way, if you do the proper ontology, use the appropriate steps, you'll get them to a fast no, which means you can actually go to a customer, not waste time on this guy who's going to end up no in 3 months. Get him to say no in 3 days, right? Or 3 minutes. Rather than wait 3 months. That way you can go focus on all the other available guys. So the ontology, really, the call to action for our community is let's start to put our collective minds together and say, can we have an ontology? We've answered that question with a resounding yes, because we've made our business case and said, okay, here's the ontology. We've built a community around it, etc. Does this ontology resonate? We'd love to hear that from our audience. If it does resonate, do you have an artifact? Do you have a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, a Google Sheet somewhere that you can share with everyone else and say, you know, when we do, like I've been in the electronic health records business for a while, I can rattle off all the measures that we would need to talk to a doctor or a hospital about the purchase of a new EHR. Whenever I've had any startups, we've always started with that. So we can submit that from our sides. Same thing with you guys on the case study. So any artifacts that you're using that one salesperson or a marketing person can use across other companies, I think it would be a great start to make this more than just a bunch of articles, right? A bunch of articles you can read on LinkedIn and Facebook. It's not going to help you make a sale. It's not going to help you get and when I say make a sale, it could be the money that's important, or it could be the implementation of a pilot that proves that money might be possible in the future. So whatever your target is less important. What's most important is, what is your process to get there? The process is not a sales playbook. The process is not a marketing funnel. It is not a sales funnel. That is a side artifact. It's an exhaust of what you need to prove to the customer, like Don said, that you can do something for them. So if you said, what's the life cycle I care about? The life cycle I care about is the life cycle to prove to the customer that I matter to them as much as I might matter to my mom, that I matter to them and their business. And that's what the innovation life cycle is about.
Yeah, right on. And I think that it's really important for us to keep thinking about this as we're all in this together, because a lot of times there is this, I don't want to say adversarial, but at least like arm's length relationship between buyer and seller, especially early on in the relationships. Buyers don't want to be taken. Sellers don't want time wasted. Like there's this kind of arm's length thing going on. But really, we're all trying to solve the same problems. And this alignment we keep going back to is so important, because especially for a startup, an early deal, especially if it's a big one with a misaligned customer, will kill your business. For a customer, if you pick up a vendor, you pick up a solution that is misaligned to what you're trying to solve, and you go through this whole process, you all know how hard it is to get through the procurement cycle and get everybody internally in the organization to sign off so that you can do a thing. You're going to waste 2 years, right? 2 years of not solving your actual problem. It's going to be pain for everybody. So we all got to come together. We're going to figure out like what is the best way as an HCO, as a buyer on the buyer side, and as a vendor, a startup, and an innovator on the other side, what's the best way to, as quickly as possible, find out if there is alignment? And to your point, get to that no quickly, that early no. If that alignment doesn't exist, finding that out early is the best possible thing for everybody. That frees you to go find your next customer, frees them to go find the right vendor. That's going to help the whole industry move forward. And if we all have that mindset, I think it can really, like, it'll help all of us innovate more quickly. So as we do this, let's keep thinking about that from both sides. Like, how do we come together to find that alignment? And, with that in mind, develop the ontology as an innovation community, right? This isn't Metagy is not developing an ontology. HC Biz Show is not developing an ontology. Metagy is just guiding the community in the creation of this ontology, which means we need all of you to participate. So please do send us your questions, send us your ideas. If you have, starting with those early topics that we said, if you have good questions that if you're on the entrepreneur side, good questions that you ask your prospects early in the sales cycle that lead to this type of success, send them into us. Let's share them. If you're a customer who has some of those good, how are you going to prove to me that you've been successful type questions, send those into us. Let's start there. So please do participate. Send us your ideas for shows. Send us questions. What do you want to know more of? What do we think we can move away from and do less of? All of that. Please guide us. In addition to this ontology and this concept, is we're not going to completely shy away from like exploring new industry trends and things like that too. So you can also expect upcoming episodes around things like Web3, something I've been digging into quite a bit lately after having my basically blinders on to over the last couple of years. I didn't want to be involved. The last couple of months, I've gotten in deep, and I'm starting to say this isn't all speculation and around Bitcoins and things. There's some serious development happening out there that could maybe apply to healthcare in very meaningful ways. So we're going to explore some of the Web3 platforms that are evolving and how they might apply. And certainly there's some people trying to do it in healthcare already. So explore things like that. We're going to talk about platforms. What is a platform? What does it mean to develop a good one? And what are the properties of it? Everyone talks about, well, we're a platform. What does that really mean? Can people make money using a platform? Can people make a living on your platform that aren't you? Things like that we'll explore. Any other topics that we've talked about that I'm missing here, Shahid?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is to look at what the experience has been in other industries and bring them in piecemeal that says, look, this is easy to apply. Why aren't we doing it? So I'm on the board of a number of different startups. They're all doing lots of very, very interesting things. But often in my coaching sessions, I just sit and say, why are you inventing this in healthcare? It's been solved here 10 times in this other industry. So one of the common themes that we should be looking at is, for example, we'll hear often, hey, big EHR companies can never work together, or big medical device vendors can never work together because they're competitors, etc. Well, let's look at another industry, the computer industry. All of us, many of you are probably watching this video on a browser or on a piece of software, that some of the largest competitors in the world, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, no one can claim these are friends. They are the largest competitors of their kind and some of the most powerful as well as most valuable companies in the world. These are multi-trillion-dollar. If you add just these four companies, that's $3.5 trillion of market cap and competitors all day long. Most of you probably don't know that Microsoft's browser, which is several $100 billion worth of value inside the company, Google's browser, several $100 billion of value inside the company that builds their brand and everything else, rest on 60, 75, 85% the same software. In the case of Microsoft and Google, it's called Chrome. Chrome is the brand. Chromium is the open source infrastructure. So now think about this. The largest, most valuable companies in the world, who have no R&D spend problems, by the way. It's not like they lack money.
Right.
They are competitors all day long. I mean, fierce competitors. But they recognize, you know what? 85% of my needs on a browser and your needs on a browser are the same. What are we going to do? We're going to innovate on the 15% or the 2% or the 5%. Now, there's another browser, which Apple does not use. It's called WebKit. That's their infrastructure. So Chromium and WebKit are the two core browser platforms. Many companies build on WebKit. Many companies build on Chromium. Some also build on Firefox, etc. But I want you guys to hear this example. This is not, I'm not making this up. Every day, these massive competitors, literally engineers, work together on code. Imagine that for a moment, that two academic medical centers routinely would send doctors to each other to say, hey, go talk to this guy to how to improve the surgery room let's say New York. You have multiple academic medical centers, and New York actually happens to have a nice, vibrant, competitors do work with each other. But imagine in your regular meetings, you had doctors from other hospitals routinely working together on cases. That is not normal, but that is normal in the software industry. So we can learn from the software industry how to share intellectual property, which is what the software industry rests on. I hear this so many times. You go to an HL7 meeting, you go to a meeting where medical device vendors are working with each other or software vendors are working with each other. Like, I can't talk about that guy. He might learn something about what I'm doing. Like, nobody cares about you. Nothing that you are doing is that advanced.
Yeah, it's not that novel.
It's not that novel.
Yeah.
Almost everything that we do in software today, 95% of it is coming from someone else. Every software company is only working on the last 10% margins everywhere. Okay? So get over yourselves. Your BD guys are morons if they're telling you, don't go work with these other companies, right? Your CEO is a knucklehead and you should quit that company if they say, no, don't work with these other companies. They're crazy people, right? Now, if somebody says, well, there's no example of companies working together, like, wait a minute. The most valuable software in the world is a web browser. The most valuable companies in the world working on intellectual property that is the most valuable in the world are these three that are worth the most in the world. They work together, but somehow we're special.
Yeah.
So that's a whole, this is why I say when we talk about platforms and we talk about these kinds of things, don't bring in the bullshit about healthcare being special. No, that was true 25 years ago. But today, healthcare happens on your phone just like everything else. Healthcare, there are parts of healthcare that are special, and that happens in a surgery room. That happens between a patient and their doctor. There are lots of special things. But your software is not so novel that somehow it's special in healthcare, right? Your line of code is a line of code. Your digits are your digits. And so and again, here you're talking to two, computer scientists and people who have built these packages. They're not that different. So I'd love to talk over the next, couple hundred episodes about what is Disney doing in entertainment that can be applied to software in medical devices. Why? Well, because when Disney creates entertainment on a weekly basis, which is basically an entire sci-fi movie that they can put together looking beautiful, what is the technology that allows them to go from concept to production every week with super high quality, get it streamed and paid for all at once? What can we learn from that process? What can we learn from what the airline industry is doing when every airplane is exactly the same? But you have to get these things up into the air and down with luggage, logistics, etc., all the time, hundreds of times a day, safely. Like, you don't hear planes falling out of the sky every day, but you hear mistakes happening in healthcare all the time, right? Now, these are the things that we have to say. Healthcare has an enormous amount of unique value, but that value is in the healthcare services. The doctor-patient relationship is special. There is not another industry where you can say, oh, I have that same relationship with my financial advisor. No, you don't, right? The doctor-patient relationship is sacrosanct. It's special. The caregiver nurse relationship, very special. So these relationships are special. Healthcare, the industry is not special, right? The individual relationships are special. What happens in a surgery room, very special. You can't just say that there are 9 other places where something like what a surgery is doing happens as well. Not true. But the devices used in surgery have to be just as safe as the devices used in a cockpit on a plane. So what is the similarity between a pilot on a plane and a anesthesiologist with their anesthesiology devices? Hey, there's a lot to learn there, right? Because both are controlling devices. In the case of an anesthesiology, usually one patient at a time. In the case of a pilot on a cockpit, hundreds of people with lots and lots of training. So to me, that overarching theme of how do we take and get the bullshit out of the industry to say we are special. Let's identify what is special and maintain it, but then say, come on, guys, let's not kid each other. We're not that special. We're just crappy at certain things. And then we say we are special so that we feel less bad about being crappy at certain things.
It's just harder here. You guys don't understand. It's harder in my organization.
That's right.
So yeah, I think these are all great concepts. Is find alignment, making sure you know what you're doing from go, actually solving problems. Stop thinking that you're special. You're trying, especially like as an organization, like a hospital in Buffalo is trying to do all of the same things as a hospital in San Diego, as a hospital anywhere in the country. Maybe like you said, 15% uniqueness, 10% uniqueness, probably smaller. We're all trying to do the same stuff. So yeah, let's all stop trying to think we're special and using that as an excuse to not innovate more effectively, which again is the whole point of all this, is like, let's identify the things that matter. Let's get them aligned. Let's do them. Let's just get things done and stop making excuses. That'll be the theme for the show going forward. So again, to you, the listener, or we're actually going to be putting these out on YouTube now. If you're watching, submit questions. Let us know what you want to do. Let us know what's worked for you. Let us know what hasn't worked for you if you're willing to share those flops. That's some of the best ways to learn. But yeah, Shahid, this has, again, been a great 6 years with you. Look forward to continuing this on with the new format, the videos. So yeah, to you, the listener, you can check us out, thehcbiz.com, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you might go to look for content. We're everywhere. And certainly you can find Shahid and I on all of those channels as well. So that's it, Shahid. We're 200 in the books. We're going to keep going. All
right. No, I'm looking forward to it. And in fact, what we'd love to do is, if some of you feel that a live show every once in a while might make sense, where we can actually have questions and responses from live audiences popping in on video. Some of the capabilities that we have on this nice Riverside tool that we use is that you can pull in somebody, you can put up a screen. Like if you want to say, look, I can't send you this expectations Excel spreadsheet, but I can show it to you guys real quick, bring it up on the screen, show it to us, walk us through what you're doing. And that's really what we want to do is, if you're an innovator and you want to sell your wares, come on to our show. Tell us why. How would you prove that you matter to your customers? Show us the expectation, show us the discovery, show us how you would help evaluate, and you'll get all the airtime you want if you're becoming more and more useful to our customers.
Yeah, right on. And that's why I'm glad you said that, because we're not necessarily doing these full-length interviews like we've been doing, but we're absolutely going to pull folks in when they have something to contribute, whether it be for a soundbite or a small segment. So yeah, absolutely, there will be opportunities for that. So yeah, just excited to keep this going. And yeah, thank you, the listeners, for sticking with us over the last 6 years. And for those that are new, welcome. We look forward to learning with you. We'll see you next time on the HC Biz Show.